How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video at the Neds MMA channel. I am your host, Omar. Today we're talking about UFC 280, arguably the most stacked card of the year. Sorry if I sound a little tired. It's been a long day, but I gotta pump out the videos for you guys. Gotta pump out the big cards, the ones that really matter, the ones that make a difference in the sport, and this is one of them. For everyone out there trying to watch this card, just a reminder, this does start at 1 p.m. Central Time. 1 p.m. Central Time. That's when the pay-per-view starts. Prelims start at 9 a.m. So it's an early card. So make sure you wake up, put your alarm on. Don't be doing too much of the boozing Friday night if you're trying to catch some fights. It's not going to be in the evening, so just keep that a reminder that it's overseas. It's in Abu Dhabi, and it's prime time for them because of the fighters on the card. You're about to see why. It's going to be a tough one. Hopefully I don't butcher any of these names. Too bad. But starting off the card, nothing too crazy. Lena Landsberg versus Carol Rosa at 135 pounds. Lena Landsberg 10-6. Coming off a loss. Carol Rosa 15-4. Also coming off a loss. I'll be honest, this is not the best fight on the card. Arguably the worst fight, which is kind of a good thing. It's the first one. It's not really gonna have implications in the women's 135 division. Yes, they are in the top 15, but I just don't see anything crazy happening. Maybe Carol Rosa can get a win. She's still young. She's 27 years old. Lena Landsberg is already for sure on the tail end of her career at already 40 years old. She's gonna be 41 in 5 months. So I'm just gonna not go too crazy deep into this, but I've just got a Carol Rosa unanimous decision, probably 29-28. Best possible way she gets a finish is via submission, but honestly, nothing crazy. Not excited for that one. So, you know, it's probably just one of the snoozers of the card. So, hey man, there's always one. But moving on, now we're getting into the good stuff. Mohamed Makhachev versus Malcolm Gordon. This is at 125 pounds, flyweight. Mohamed Makhachev 7-0, Malcolm Gordon 14-5. Mohamed Makhachev, arguably one of the most exciting prospects in the flyweight division and just in general in the UFC. 7-0, so far 2-0 in the UFC. Had a great debut against Cody Durden, who was 12-3 at the time. Hit him with a flying knee, wrapped up a guillotine. All happened in 58 seconds. That's exactly what you want to see with a prospect that's as highly touted as he is. He was, for those of you who know who Aaron Pico is, he was super hyped up. That's the kind of hype I was getting around this guy because he's so young, He just turned 22 not too long ago. Still very young. He's pretty big for the division. I think he said eventually he's going to want to move up to 135 pounds. Because he's so young and he's still growing into his frame. He's fighting Malcolm Gordon. Malcolm Gordon, first started off not the best. He had 2 losses, both by finish. Got smoked by Amir Albazi and then smoked by Suman Derji via TKO in 44 seconds. But then he comes back, beats Francisco Figueiredo dominantly. Francisco Figueiredo is the brother of current flyweight champion Davison Figueiredo. Obviously, Francisco's not as good as his brother, and he's kind of showed it with a few of his losses and just how he fights. They have a very similar style, very similar stances, but you can tell that Davison is the far better fighter. A decent win, nothing too crazy. I'm not going to put too much emphasis on that win. But he beat Denise Bondar, 16-3. It was going pretty competitive. It was a very short fight, only a minute 22, and it ended with a arm injury by Bondar. But hey, it's part of the fight game, and it's a W. He got the finish. What can you say? But my prediction for this one, I think it's honestly going to be a Mohamed Makhachev finish. Like I said earlier, Malcolm Gordon is 14-5, but those 5 losses, he's been finishing every single one, and 4 of those are by TKO. He's been TKO'd 4 times, and one was in the UFC. Sometimes I don't like to harp on losses in the regional scene, but when you've been TKO'd 3 times in the regionals, and then you get submitted in the first round, and then you get finished again your fight afterwards. Like I said, he's on a 2-fight win streak, but those 2 losses, just stick out a little too hard for me. and I just see Makhachev getting a first-round finish. Honestly, whichever way he wants. Honestly, this is going to be probably another showcase for Makhachev, proving that he is a force to be reckoned with in the flyweight division. So Makhachev, first-round finish, either sub or knockout. Like I said, it's any way he wants. It's going to be pretty much a wash. Moving up in the middleweight division, 185 pounds, Armen Petrosyan versus AJ Dobson. This is going to be a fun fight. I like Armen Petrosyan. He's a striker, 6-2. AJ Dobson, 6-1. Very similar records. Armen Petrosyan, coming off a loss, but he's coming off a loss to Kyle Borralho, who's also on this card. We're going to get more into detail with later on, but he lost via TKO back in 2021, but it was more of a flash knockdown type incident. It wasn't like he got completely pummeled. And then he fought 4 months later in the Contender Series, beat a guy that was 10-0. Knocked him out in the first round. Ends up showing he is tough, showing he does have a chin when he fought Gregorio Rodriguez. Very close fight. They were banging it out. They were scrapping. It was a scrappy fight and Gregorio Rodriguez has shown that he is a dog and he brings it every time. That kind of win has aged very well for Armen Petrosyan, even though he won by split. And honestly, I didn't think he won. I thought a split decision was fine, but I gave it to Gregorio Rodriguez. But Gregorio Rodriguez, since then, has won 2 in a row, and he's already got his next fight booked. So, showing that he can hang with a guy like Gregorio Rodriguez, who has finished his last 2 fights over Julian Marquez and I believe it was Chidi Njokuani, after getting wrecked, it just shows that Armen Petrosyan is on that kind of that upper echelon level of middleweights that, a lot of guys don't seem to reach, where you think they're promising prospects and then they kind of end up just flopping. Armen Petrosyan has showed that he didn't look good against Kyle Borralho. Is that more to do with Kyle Borralho is very good and I think he's going to be top 10? Maybe, but it didn't look good the way he was defending takedowns. He was getting pretty much muscled around over the slightly bigger guy, but he should have been able to stuff some of those takedowns. Maybe he wasn't going to win regardless, but some of those takedowns, Kyle just got him far too easy for my liking. And he is fortunate he's fighting someone also very green as he is. AJ Dobson also prefers to strike a little more. He is a more well-rounded mixed martial artist, but he does prefer to strike a little more. But I don't like how he lost against Jacob Malkoun. I don't rate Jacob Malkoun that high. He's Malkoun just fought recently. He's quite a boring fighter. He doesn't do anything spectacular. He's just more of the grindy wrestler style that kind of just is frustrating to fight against. I thought he did pretty good. He was obviously getting the better of the exchanges on the feet. That's why Jacob Malkoun was working his ass off to get takedowns. But, it just wasn't enough. And, it's a shame that AJ Dobson is getting such tough matchups so quick. You would expect the UFC to take it a little slower for someone like him. It seems like they liked him, especially the way Dana talked about him when he signed him on the Contender Series. But it looks like they're pretty high on the guy, and they think he could do a lot better than he does. But I just think Armen's going to be a little too much for him on the feet. I don't think AJ Dobson has the wrestling of a Kyle Borralho to nullify Armen Petrosyan like that. But I'm gonna have to go with Armen Petrosyan via unanimous decision. 29-28. I think AJ Dobson is gonna have at least one good round, but it's not gonna be enough to win the decision. All right, moving up in the welterweight division, 170 pounds, Abubakar Nurmagomedov versus Gadzhi Omargayev. Abubakar, one of Habib and Islam's training partners. This guy's been in the UFC for quite some time, but he has not fought often at all. Gadzhi Omargayev, another guy off the Contender Series, like the 2 gentlemen before we just talked about. Also, his first UFC fight was against Kyle Borralho, and he was honestly getting his ass whooped. Kyle was whooping him worse than he was whooping on Armen. He was really, really showing how much of a difference being in your right weight class means. I know I harp on a lot on the Dagestanis for being a bit of weight bullies, but Gadzhi, was fighting at 185 pounds. He's not a small guy. He's 6'1", has a 71.5-inch reach. He's not a small guy, but, he's he was 13-0 prior to that. He won by knee bar against a 7-1 guy. Before that, he beat a 7-0 guy. He's fighting actually decent competition at middleweight. So, I'm not going to harp him too much to losing to Cabo Halio. He lost by technical decision. He was milking illegal knee. It was hard, but it wasn't that hard. The second he found out it was an illegal knee, he was putting on his best Aljimain Sterling performance. No disrespect to the champ, but come on, man. We all know what you were doing with that one in the first Petr Yan fight. That's besides the point, though. But back to my prediction on the fight. I'm going to have to go with Gadzhi Omargadzev. Abu Bakr is the favorite. I honestly think he's just a favorite because he trains out of Khabib's team, and he trains with Islam, and he trains with all those guys in that camp. But this man has lost fights that he shouldn't have been losing, and he's been stopped in all three of his losses. He's 18-3. He lost to Magomed Mustafayev, who was going to be on this card, but unfortunate circumstances had that fight dropped out recently. He lost to Mustafayev via TKO. It was doctor stoppage. Then in the PFL, he got rear naked choked in the second round. Against a guy that was 22-5, someone that he's supposed to beat. And then he has a draw against Bojan, who is okay. He's not great, a former UFC vet, but he should, like I said, for how this guy fights out of these camps, and how highly these guys are touted out of the Eagles MMA camp or the AKA camps of all these Dagestanis. Like, he should be winning some of these fights. He lost to David Zawadi. He got triangled. Looks like 18 months off, and then fights Jared Gooden. Jared Gooden is not great. I never rated Jared Gooden too high. I think he went 2-2 in the UFC. And, he kind of just jabbed his face off. It was honestly kind of boring. But that fight took place 2021 in March. It's been 18 months, He doesn't fight often. Like I mentioned earlier, he's joined the UFC back in 2019. He's had 2 fights. Lost one, barely beat Jared. He kind of smoked Jared Gunn. Let me get that straight. But it was pretty uneventful. He didn't take any damage, so it's kind of confusing why he's not fighting often. He's pulled out of 2 fights since then. And, it just doesn't make me confident in someone that's extremely inactive. And he's not like he's a young man. He's 32 years old. He's about to be 33, actually, here in a month. So I think Gadzhi is going to be the better fighter. He's going to be stronger in there because he's moving down from 85 pounds to 170. And I think it's going to show, when they face off. And I think Gadzhi's going to win it. It's going to be competitive when it comes to the grappling. when you're getting 2 Dagestani wrestlers, 2 Dagestani grapplers going at it, it's actually going to be entertaining to watch because they know exactly what they do. And then when both fighters know what they do, it's going to be competitive, and it's going to be a little scrappy, a little wild. Maybe they're going to stand and bang, it could happen. But I'm going to have to go with Gadzhi Omargadzev via decision, 29-28 as well. I think Abu Bakr is going to win a round in there somewhere, possibly the third, because Gadzhi was slowing down pretty hard in that Kyle fight. Especially got to take in the consideration he's dropping down in weight. That could also take a toll on his cardio. All right, moving on to the 145 pounds. Featherweight. Zubair Tukhugov versus Lucas Almeida. Zubair Tukhugov, another one of Khabib's boys, out of Eagles MMA, a.k.a. 20-5. He's another guy that I never rated too highly, and I'm actually kind of I'm going to say pretty upset that they have him so highly ranked on Tapology, their unofficial rankings. They have him ranked at 18 at featherweight, which is, to be quite honest with you, pretty ludicrous. He hasn't fought in a year, almost pretty much to the date. Prior to that, almost another year. And then Ricardo Ramos is a fantastic one. I'm not going to take that away from him. But he's lost to Hakeem Dawodu. He gassed in that fight. He couldn't get his takedowns in. And it showed. When he can't get his takedowns in and he's already in the halfway through the second round and third round, he's gassed. He doesn't have good cardio. And it shows. Same thing with his Lerone Murphy fight. Same thing with his Renato Moicano fight. He smoked Kevin Aguilar. Decent win, but has it aged well? No, not really, because he hasn't won a fight since then. He lost. He he's lost 2 fights since then. He got cut by the UFC. You know, his win over Kevin Aguilar hasn't aged well. And then, like I said, that was in 2020 in February. You know, it's been a while, and his last one was last year, uh, almost to the date against Ricardo Ramos. Good win. It was very competitive though. He beat Ricardo Ramos 29-28. Do I think Lucas Almeida is better than Ricardo Ramos? I don't know. It's hard to say because he does have a good record on paper. He's 14-1. He had a very good, fun fight against Mike Trizano, one of the more underrated fights of the year so far. But he got rocked, and he got rocked in the first round. And the most dangerous part of Zubairu's game is he's pretty aggressive in the first round, and he does hit pretty hard. I won't take that away from him. And also, I also don't like that he lost to. This is Almeida that I'm talking about. He lost to Daniel Zolber. It was a pretty highly touted Mexican prospect, but he looked like shit his last fight. So it's like, is Daniel really that good? Did Lucas Almeida have a night off? You know, there's a lot of factors that play into this. Now, if it gets outside the first round, I'm gonna go with the Lucas Almeida 29-28. But my gut tells me, and I gotta go with my brain and my gut. You know, I'm not trying to be biased here. I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. You know, my bias is hoping that it gets out of the first round and I get a Lucas Almeida W. But reality of the game, I think it's going to be a Zubairu Tukhugov W, first round TKO. But like I said, if he doesn't get it, even if he rocks him, he's going to be in a long night because Zubairu gasses, Lucas Almeida brings it on heavy, and he doesn't lose track of what he does. This is Almeida that I'm talking about. He doesn't lose track of what he does. He keeps on with the combinations. He has very good hands. He has very good hooks to the body, and he mixes it up well. And that's going to give Zubairu trouble. Ricardo Ramos' unorthodoxness gave him trouble, and Ricardo Ramos isn't the biggest featherweight. Lucas Almeida is kind of a big featherweight, so we also got to take that into consideration. But my gut, I have to go with my gut and my brain, and both telling me Zubairu Tukhugov first round TKO. All right, another fantastic fight, top 15 light heavyweights which is 205 pounds. Volkan Ozdemir versus Nikita Krylov. This is gonna go one of two ways. You know, this is gonna go one of two ways. This is either going to be very, very fun or very, very ugly. But, you know, Volkan Ozdemir, 18-6, coming off a win over Paul Craig in a quite abysmal fight, to be honest. That's mostly due to Paul Craig's fault, just pulling guard and going for Ermanari rolls. Classic BJJ guys that never decide to learn wrestling, proper wrestling, and then you get performances like that. Nikita Krylov coming off a big win, knocking out Alexander Gustafsson in the first round. You know, they both fought on the same card, and then Nikita Krylov's fight prior to that was Paul Craig. You know, he got triangled in the first round, but that's what happens when you play in Paul Craig's guard. You get triangled. Even though Krylov was literally smashing him the entire fight till said triangle was locked in. You know, it was kind of frustrating to watch because it's like you should just let him up because you have the advantage on the feet. You know, you don't need to go to the ground with him. You literally, what Volkan did is literally exactly how you beat him. You know, just piece him up at range. You know, if he can't get you to the ground, he's not going to wrestle you. He's not going to try to blast double legs on you and put you on your back. No, he's going to try to throw in a shitty single leg or a shitty double leg and then pull guard. Nikita Krylov could have defended that all night, but he decided to play in the guard. You know, he was very confident in his skills, and it kind of showed that, you know, you can't be doing that against someone like Paul Craig because he's going to snatch up that triangle like nobody's business. But talking about this fight, now that both of these gentlemen are going to be facing each other, I'm going to go with the Nikita Krylov win. Volkan hasn't looked great in recent memory, you know. He hasn't, you know, really showed anything fantastic. His Paul Craig won, yeah, he got the win. He didn't look great. Honestly, he probably could have knocked out Paul Craig if he really stepped on the gas a little bit in the second and third round. He was a little too tentative for my liking at certain points because sometimes you had Paul Craig just standing in front of him doing nothing. You know, prior to that, I lost to Magomed Ankalaev. No shame in that. Magomed Ankalaev has proven that he's a top 3 guy in the division, and he's about to have a number 1 contender fight. Prior to that, Jiri Prochazka, UFC light heavyweight champion of the world. And then before that, you know, he had a split decision over Rakic, and then Latifi, you know, and then he had other few losses that, you know, it's like, why are you losing to those guys? for his skill set. But like I said, Volkan is just a little too inconsistent for my liking. Nikita Krylov um, looked fantastic his last fight, and I think he's going to bring that confidence over. And I'm going with the Nikita Krylov uh, second round TKO win. I think Volkan is pretty much, I'm gonna say pretty much done making any title runs. He hasn't evolved. He hasn't shown anything that makes him, an absolute threat. His power hasn't really been shown since his Jimmy Mano win, or his Ilir Latifi win. So it's I don't have a lot of confidence in him, and the odds makers prove it as well. So I'm gonna go with the Nikita Krylov finish, second round via TKO. All right, moving on to middleweight. I think we got one more on the prelims, but this is another fantastic fight. Makhmud Muradov versus Kyle Borralho. Makhmud Muradov, 25-7. Kyle Borralho is 12-1. One of my most up and coming prospects that I'm really hyped about. He's shown that he can strike, he can grapple, he's good everywhere. He doesn't take too many risks. He knows what he needs to do to get the W, and he'll do what he has to. He was getting a lot of shit his last fight against Arman. Like, oh, this guy's just a wet blanket. This and this. But then they compliment Islam and Habib and all these other Dagestanis when he was doing the exact same thing. Now he's getting shit for it. MMA fans are a fickle bunch. But, he's been nothing but impressive since he came onto the Contender Series. He smoked Aaron Jeffrey. Dana didn't like it. He felt like he was playing around too much, played it a little too safe. But Aaron Jeffrey's good, man. He's 13-3. This guy's just proved he's a force to be reckoned with in Bellator. Smoked Austin Vanderford, aka Mr. Van Zant. He smoked him in the first round. That kind of just proves that a regional champion, Gegard Moisasi, isn't as good as people think he is. Shout out to Jack Slack with that little jab right there. But he's a good fighter. Aaron Jeffrey's a good fighter. So that's why he wasn't taking risks. And then he smokes Jesse Murray just 3 weeks later. And then destroys Gadzhi Omargaidzev. Then just completely dominates Armen Petrosyan. And then I think Kyle Borralho is a lock because Makhmud Muradov has shown to be pretty decent in his first 3 fights. And then he fights Gerald Meerschaert, and then there's just a threat of the takedown. He just completely just shits the bed. And then he just gets rear naked choked in the second round. He starts slowing down. Gerald Meerschaert started landing on him, and then just made it look easy. I'm not the biggest fan of Gerald Meerschaert. He does beat good guys, but he doesn't beat great guys. And that kind of just proves to me that if you can't get through someone like Gerald Meerschaert, do you even really belong in the top 15? It kind of sucks to see Makhmud Muradov lose like that because I was pretty hyped with him 2 years ago, but now not so much. Especially when Gerald Meerschaert, lost to Krzysztof Jotko this year, and Krzysztof Jotko, he's another guy that's like beats good guys, doesn't beat great guys, So it's one of those things. It's like, how good are these guys really? But I think Kyle is one of the great guys in this division, and I think he's going to beat Makhmud Muradov via submission in the second round. Kyle Borralho, I think, honestly, is one of the locks of the night. And the odds aren't too bad on him, so any bettors out there, I won't blame you if you put a little money on Kyle Borralho. I think he's just going to grapple him, kind of just bully him around. It might even be a unanimous decision if Makhmud Muradov has been working on his grappling. But I see Kyle getting a finish because Muradov did not impress me in his last fight, and it kind of just shows me that he's not ready for the top 15. And I think Kyle is a guy that's ready for the top 15. All right, headlining the prelims, which honestly should be on the main card, Bilal Muhammad versus Sean Brady. This is at welterweight, 170 pounds. These are top 10 welterweights, the cream of the crop. Actual fantastic fighters. Title implications, maybe. Depends how they win. Bilal Muhammad, 21-3. Chicago boy. Gotta rep that. I like Bilal. Bilal gets a lot of shit for his fighting style, but hey, man, he's got to do what he's got to do to get the wins. His last 3 wins, pretty fantastic. Impressive on paper, but was it the most exciting thing? No, not really. But he beat Vicente Luque. He avenged that loss. He beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. And he beat Damian Maia. and he hasn't lost since Jeff Neal back in 2019. He's been on let's look at that, 4, 5, 6, 7 fight win streak, and he has a no contest in there against Leon Edwards, the current champion. Um, Bilal Muhammad, 21-3 overall, has really grown into himself, and has really developed himself to be a full-on, full-fledged, well-rounded mixed martial artist. He can strike strike with strikers if he needs to, but he's good enough to wrestle, be able to out-grapple strikers, and he's good enough to outstrike grapplers. Does that make sense? I think I've said that correctly. But he's one of those guys that kind of like a little bit like GSP. He's not as good as him, but GSP had that style of, all right, if you're a better striker than me, then I'm just gonna out-grapple you. If you're a better grappler than me, I'm just gonna outstrike you. That kind of style, and that's how Bilal Muhammad kind of fights. Sean Brady, 15-0, one of my more highly rated prospects. Not even prospects, contenders. 15-0. He's on a look at that 6-fight win streak in the UFC. Excuse me. Yeah, 5-fight win streak. He had a few wins in the grappling scene. Sean Brady could arguably be the best grappler in the welterweight division. Grappler, This guy's good, man. He was kind of schooling Michael Chiesa on the ground. He choked out Jake Matthews. He choked out Christian Aguilera. He was dominating Ismail Nurdiyev, and he smoked Court McGee on the ground. Like he's beating good guys, and he's fought in championship rounds before. His fight before the UFC, he beat a guy that was 8-1 in the 4th round via TKO punches. This guy's grappling is so good. He beat Craig Jones in grappling last year. All you got to do is Google who Craig Jones is, and you see the kind of grappling accolades this guy's had. He's a beast. He's a monster. This guy can fucking grapple his ass off. Now, he hasn't fought in nearly a year, and I hope that he has been working on his striking, because that's what was giving him trouble his last fight against Chiesa. I will give him the benefit of the doubt because he did break his nose early in the first round, so that was causing him a bit of cardio issues, because he said he was swallowing blood nonstop. That was causing him a lot of issues breathing, and he has shown to have good cardio and be able to grapple the hell out of some dudes. All the gym stories, literally everyone you see any other video on fighters talking about Sean Brady, they say just how ridiculously strong he is. He said he feels like a heavyweight on top of you. And Bilal Muhammad, someone who's also known to be extremely strong. But I think Sean Brady is gonna be able to nullify any grappling that Bilal tries to do. The striking is just a thing that's going to be a little iffy. Bilal Muhammad does have good hands, decent enough hands to give someone like Sean Brady problems. But that's the thing. Has Sean Brady been working on his hands? I hope so. But right now, I just got to go with my gut. And I think Bilal Muhammad is going to get a unanimous decision, 30-27. I think Bilal Muhammad is hitting his absolute prime right now. I think Sean Brady, even if he loses this, he's not going to go anywhere. It's going to be just more of a learning lesson. He loses it, but he didn't get a finish. I don't think Bilal Muhammad's going to get the finish. I think it's just going to be 30-27 win, giving just Sean Brady, a little too much problems, not being able to let him get the takedown, and just keeping it on the feet and winning. Honestly, probably a quite uneventful decision. But I do hope it goes to the ground, man. I really hope Sean Brady gets a takedown in there. We can see some grappling exchanges between these two. I think Bilal Muhammad has a little bit of underrated grappling game, even though he hasn't really finished anyone's submissions. He's very good on the ground. He's very strong. So I would like to see someone like Sean Brady fight someone with similar strength as he does, or maybe just slightly weaker. But Sean Brady's a strong dude, and I'd like to see him and Bilal Muhammad grapple it up a bit. Show us some top-notch MMA grappling, which would be awesome. But like I said, Bilal Muhammad, UD 29, 30-27. All right, now kicking off the main card. Katlyn Chookagian versus Manon Fiorot at 125 pounds, women's flyweight. Katlyn Chookagian, 18-4, coming off a loss. She's actually coming off a 4-fight win streak. Hasn't lost since 2020. Lost to Jessica Andrade before that. Lost to the champ Valentina. She had a pretty tough fight with Amanda Ribas her last fight. It was a little surprising. I thought she was going to take Ribas to school just because of the size difference, and Ribas being a little chinny. But no, Ribas proved that she can cause problems for someone like Caitlin Chukagian. I think that just shows you how much better the women's 115-pound division is than the women's 125. And I think this is a great fight for Manon Fiorot fighting someone like Caitlin Chukagian, because Caitlin Chukagian wins fights because she has decent enough hands and she's tall and lengthy enough to keep these girls away from her. Manon Fiorot is a kickboxer, and she's not tiny either. She's 5'7". She has 66-inch reach. Caitlin Chukagian, I believe, is 5'9", with a 68-inch reach. She's fighting someone a little closer to her size. Because if you look at the women that Chukagian has fought, they're all fairly short reaches. Amanda Ribas, 5'3". Jennifer Maia, I think, is 5'4". And she's able to keep those kind of girls away. She lost to Andrade because Andrade obviously Andrade is a monster. But I think Manon Fiorot, who's probably got better striking overall, maybe not better boxing, but better striking overall, that's going to give someone like Caitlin Chukagian some problems. And I think this is going to be a bit of a coming out party for Manon Fiorot, and showing that we have a new flyweight contender for Valentina Shevchenko who could possibly give her problems. I think this is going to answer a lot of questions. Say if Manon Fiorot goes out there and smokes Caitlin Chukagian, say finishes her via TKO, we're going to be excited for a Manon Fiorot Valentina Shevchenko fight. I don't think she's going to get a finish. I do think Manon Fiorot is going to get the W. I think her kicks and her aggressiveness is going to give Caitlin a bit of problems. I don't think Caitlin's size advantage is going to help her as much, her size and reach. So I'm going to have to go with Manon Fiorot 29-28. And then we're going to have a new contender on our hands, and possibly Valentina's next fight if Fiorot shows a good performance. I hope it's not lackluster. I hope Manon Fiorot really proves it and shows it. But I think Manon Fiorot is someone that's not a good fight for Caitlin. I think it's a very bad stylistic matchup for her. So I'm going to have to go with Manon Fiorot, unanimous decision. All right. On to another banger of a fight. Beneil Dariush versus Mateusz Gamrot at lightweight, 155 pounds. Benny Dariush, 21-4. Mateusz Gamrot, 21-1. Fantastic records on both these gentlemen. Beneil Dariush has been out for a little bit. I don't like it, but hey, that's what happens when you have a pretty massive leg injury. I believe he broke his ankle. I don't know if it required surgery. Don't take my word for it, but he had to step out for a little bit. At the time, back in 2021, when he beat Tony Ferguson, this was a great win. It hasn't aged the best because he beat him by unanimous decision, didn't finish him, and he beat Diego Ferreira prior to that. And then before that, Scott Holtzman, Ricardo Close, Frank Camacho, Drew Dober, Thiago Moises. So some of these names have aged pretty well. Some of them not so much. Like the Frank Camacho win hasn't aged greatly. Scott Holtzman win hasn't aged greatly. Tony Ferguson hasn't aged greatly. But Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, Ricardo Close, and Diego Ferreira are still kind of decent wins. I just don't like that he's been out for so long. Luckily, he's not that old. He's only 33. Still physically in his prime. But I just think he's fighting someone that does everything that he does, but better. Mateusz Gamrot is very freaking good, and his record shows it. He's 21-1 for a reason. He's coming off a win over Arman Tsarukyan. Say what you want about this decision. I didn't agree with it, but he still made it extremely competitive, and he still was winning exchanges and showing things of how high level this guy's grappling is. If you want to see a very competitive grappling fight and see possibly the future of how a mixed martial arts fight is going to look like, watch Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot. What a fantastic fight. High level chess match. And Mateusz Gamrot proved that he can grapple with the best of them. Before that, he beat Diego Ferreira. Diego Ferreira, I think he had a broken rib due to a knee that Mateusz Gamrot landed. And then before that, he smoked Jeremy Stevens in like a minute with a Kimura, to prove that he didn't belong. Smoked Scott Holtzman. And then before that, lost to Guram Kutateladze, which I thought Mateusz Gamrot won, but it was a split decision, and a lot of people are very hyped on Guram Kutateladze, who's one of Hamzat Chimaev's training partners. I think it's like his main training partner. But this guy, even before that, fighting at KSW. KSW is a very respectful organization. A lot of good fighters out of there. And he's just, he was a champion there and he defended his belt a few times. And I think right now he's in his prime. He's coming into himself. He's 31 years old. And he's just an absolute beast. And he's not a small man for lightweight. Because I believe he used to fight at featherweight. But he's really grown into himself fighting at lightweight. He's not a small guy, 5'10", 71-inch reach. I mean, Benil, I think, is the same 5'10", 72-inch reach. Just an inch of reach on him with the arm reach. They're the same height, but like I said, Mateus just does everything better. Maybe other than submissions themselves, but Gamrot can wrestle his ass off. Gamrot can strike his ass off. Benny can do the same thing, but Benny's a little slower, a little chinnier, and his cardio's not as good. Beneil Dariush has shown to slow down, even in 3-round fights. And that's not a good thing. And Mateusz Gamrot proved that he can go 5 full rounds in a high pace against a very, very strong opponent like Arman Tsarukyan. So I'm going to have to go with Mateusz Gamrot. I think he's probably going to get a 3rd-round TKO finish. Beneil Dariush is just going to be too gassed. The grappling exchanges is going to be too much for him. But this fight is going to be super fun for the 1st and 2nd round. But the 3rd round, I think Mateusz is just grappling pressure, wrestling pressure is going to be too much. And Beneil being out for so long just doesn't bode well with me. So I'm going to have to go with Mateusz Gamrot via 3rd round TKO. All right. On to the feature fight of the night at 135 pounds. Petr Yan versus Sean O'Malley. Petr Yan 16-3, Sean O'Malley 15-1. A lot of the casuals are going to be tuning in this one. I know there's a lot of Sean O'Malley fans out there. I don't mind Sean O'Malley. I don't like him. I don't hate him. But do I think he's biting off a little more than he can chew here? I think so. I think Petr Yan is just a little too good on the feet, and I'll be surprised if Sean O'Malley even tries to grapple. I highly doubt it. I think he's going to try to pour and approve to strike. So the big thing here that does play a big factor is this is a 3-round fight. And the reason I say that is because Petr Yan is a very, very slow starter. He usually takes the 1st round off because he's calculating, he's assessing, he's being a little Terminator. He's downloading data, seeing what his opponents do. Sean O'Malley is a very fast starter. His best round is usually the 1st round. And I think he's going to see just Petr Yan kind of shelling up a bit, kind of taking the damage. And Sean O'Malley's just going to be like, well, this is target practice right now, and he's just going to be piecing him up. Or just landing, quote-unquote landing a lot, but maybe Petr Yan is with his beautiful, underrated high guard. He's going to be landing a lot on the arms, and then Petr Yan is just going to be downloading data. And then Sean O'Malley does slow down a bit. He is a little fragile. He's proven it numerous times with, I know he likes to say, Sean O'Malley specifically likes to say, the Marlon Vera injury was whatever, but that's not the first time it's happened with a leg injury. It happened with the Andre Sukumtal fight. I think he blew out his ankle or some shit. So he has shown to be a little brittle, and he has said, I think he has broken his hands before in fights. Petr Yan is as tough as they come, dude. This dude's a Siberian machine, dude. He's as tough as they come, and he's 16-3, but both 2 losses have been by split decision, and 1 loss was by disqualification. And you could easily make an argument that he's 18-1, and his only loss is by disqualification, because that is a first fight against I believe it was Magomed Mustafayev on the regional scenes. Magomedov, he lost by split decision, but it was only a split decision because he got a point taken away. He was winning that fight, but he got a point taken away because Petr Yan is a little bit of a, not going to say full-on cheat, but he does very much push the rules and sometimes forget what he's doing. That's why he got disqualified against Aljamain Sterling. And like I said, you can make the argument that he won the 2nd fight against Sterling because it was a split decision, 48-47 across the board. But what's given Petr Yan problems is Sterling's grappling. Does Sean O'Malley have this grappling of Sterling? No. And I think as the fight goes on, we're going to see Sean O'Malley. We're going to be impressed with Sean O'Malley in the 1st round, but we're going to see Petr Yan just turn it on in the 2nd and turn it on in the 3rd and I think we're going to get a 29-27 unanimous decision win for Petr Yan. I think the third round is just going to be complete domination. I think he's going to drop O'Malley, but O'Malley's going to show that he's tough, that he belongs in there. He's going to get 10-8'd in the third. It's going to be a 10-8 round, but he's going to be able to last in there, take the damage, and feel a little proud of himself. But Petr Yan is going to win a 29-27 unanimous decision win. This honestly might be fight of the night because Sean O'Malley's going to bring it. I think he really is. I think it does he doesn't say it, but I think it does bother him the way the Pedro Munoz fight ended up playing out as it did. He didn't do good in the first round. Pedro was spamming leg kicks, and then the second he starts to turn up, eye poke happens. He claims it's a punch. The eye poke still landed though. That's still a factor though, because you still eye poked him. And if you can't see, you can't see. That's not something you can take away from me. You fucking eye poked him. But Sean O'Malley's gonna try to come into something to prove, but I don't think it's gonna be enough. And I think it's gonna be a good learning experience for Sean O'Malley, and just shows where he stands in the bantamweight division. But Petr Yan, number one guy in the world, behind the champion. So Petr Yan, unanimous decision, 29-27. All right, on to the co-main event. Another 135-pound fight. The champ, Aljimain Sterling, versus TJ Dillashaw, number 2 in the world. This is a competitive fight, man. At first, I was like, oh, man, this is an easy TJ Dillashaw W. No questions asked. But as the more I've thought about it, I'm like, man, why am I disrespecting Aljimain like that? I can't disrespect the champ like that. The champ is 21-3. He's another guy. You look at his record. He arguably could be 23-1. 2 of his losses are by split decision. Against Brian Caraway back in 2016, and against Rafael Sunsao, another split decision loss. His only real loss you could say is Marlon Moraes. That was a very bad loss. He got kneed and got sent to the Shadow Realm, and he just got absolutely destroyed. But since then, he's pretty much been unstoppable. For the exception of the second Petr fight and first and second Petr fights, but smoked Corey Sandhagen in a minute and a half. Took Pedro Munoz to school, took Jimmy Rivera to school, took Cody Stamann to school, took Brett Johns to school, All these guys are good fighters. Like Brett Johns was 15-0 at the time. Cody Stamann 17-1. Jimmy Rivera 22-2. Pedro Munoz 18-3. Corey Sandhagen 12-1. Petr Yan was 15-1 when they first fought. These are all fantastic wins. Dillashaw, say what you want about him popping for EPO. He does claim that it only was for the Cejudo fight. USADA and the athletic commissions went back and tested his fights against Cody, but everything came out negative. So it is hard to say how long he's been juicing, but that doesn't matter right now. He hasn't fought in 15 months. That's a very, very long time. And he fought Corey Sandhagen. It was a split decision. I didn't think TJ Dillashaw won. I thought Corey did enough. I think he won by damage because I thought that's how fights are supposed to be judged. Damage trumps all, but, you can't really hold that when it comes to these judges. But, he got the W. He was up next in line since Peter's lost twice. Corey got starched by Sterling already. So this is an intriguing matchup. And I think this is going to be a very, very competitive fight. I think this is going to be a split decision for either way. Which way it goes, I'll be honest, I don't know because this is so 50-50. I can see TJ Dillashaw just piecing up Aljamain Sterling one round. And then next thing you know, Sterling gets a takedown and just has back control for the 4 minutes. And that's a Sterling round. And back and forth, back and forth. But if I have to go with my gut, I'm going to have to go with Aljamain Sterling winning 48-47 across the board. TJ Dillashaw having maybe a good second round, maybe a good fifth round. Sterling slowing down in the fifth. But I think Sterling's size and grappling and jiu-jitsu is just going to be a little too much for TJ Dillashaw. I think TJ Dillashaw also is a little too arrogant. Sometimes gives me a little bit of Luke Rockhold vibes. You can't be that arrogant when you're fighting some of these guys, man. He does look in fantastic shape, but sometimes his biggest downfall is his arrogance. Kind of what happened to him in the Dominic Cruz fight, why he lost that. Same thing with Henry Cejudo. I think some of these guys he just wasn't taken seriously, and then it showed. And he just he got starched by Cejudo, and then he was swinging like a madman against Dominic Cruz in that first fight. That's how Dominic Cruz got ahead early on. TJ fought way too aggressive. He took the fight way too personally, and it just showed. because I think TJ Dillashaw does have a bit of an ego, and he sometimes fights a little emotional. He kept his cool against Cody Garbrandt because if there's someone with a bigger ego and someone that doesn't control their emotions more than him, it's someone like Cody Garbrandt. But I think Aljamain Sterling is going to win. I don't like Aljamain's excuses he's kind of making, saying he's like, TJ's been juicing his whole career. This guy should be freaking fined and should be banned from the sport and all this. It's like, dude, shut your ass up. Like, fight him. Like, you already accepted to fight him. Why are you saying this shit? Just let your fighting do the talking, whoop his ass, and then just move on to the next guy. That's why I'm not an Aljamain Sterling fan, because of some of the shit he says. He's kind of an idiot. Smart guy, but also an idiot, if that makes sense. He says very, very smart things. He knows how to break down fights, but sometimes, like, his own personal opinions and just some of the things he spews out is just like, dude, get over yourself. But Aljamain Sterling is going to win this 48-47 across the board. One judge might give it to TJ, or it might just be 48-47 across the board. But I think Sterling is just too good. He's going to be too big, too strong, and the grappling is going to really nullify TJ Dillashaw's skill. So, yep. Now on to the main event. Everyone that has been waiting for this is extremely hyped, extremely excited, and cannot wait. All of us are nervous, praying to the MMA gods that this fight doesn't fall through. So far, we're so good. Knock on wood. Charles Oliveira versus Islam Makhachev for the lightweight championship of the world. I don't think a lot of people don't understand how historic this fight is. I think this is the first fight in UFC history where two gentlemen are fighting for a belt that have more than 10 plus. They are currently on a 10 plus fight win streak. That is crazy. We are getting peak MMA, the best of the best fighting in their physical prime. And I cannot say how excited I am for this fight. It's too much. I don't know if my heart will be able to handle it. This is crazy. It's crazy. I've been a big Charles Oliveira fan since he first joined the UFC, or I think I watched his, I believe it was his Efrain Escudero fight, his second fight in the UFC. He was a young chap at the time. I think he was 21 years old, 20? I think he was 21 or 22. And, he was 13-0 at the time, and he just completely smoked Efrain Escudero, a tough winner, 13-1 at the time. Prior to that, he smoked Darren Elkins, 11-1 at the time. And then that's when a few hiccups happened. Fought Jim Miller. Jim Miller was top 5 back then. People sometimes look at Charles Oliveira's losses and they start picking and choosing. Jim Miller was top 5 at the time. He was 18-2. He lost to Cerrone. He fought Nick Lentz after that. He originally won, but it was turned over to a no contest due to an illegal knee that landed. Okay, fair. But he was whooping on Nick Lentz. Then he loses to Donald Cerrone. People are saying, Donald Cerrone? Yo, Donald Cerrone in 2011? That man was 15-3. That was a deadly Donald Cerrone. That was a very, very good Donald Cerrone. And then he moves down to featherweight. And this is where a lot of his losses come from. Goes 2-0, loses to Cub Swanson and Frankie Edgar. But Frankie Edgar in 2013 is still one of the pound for pound fighters at the time. I think Frankie Edgar was coming off a loss to Jose Aldo. Just think about that. This is still like a 24-year-old, 23-year-old Charles Oliveira. Like, Frankie Edgar had just lost his lightweight belt, arguably got robbed against Benson Henderson, then fights Jose Aldo, loses I had it 49-46, but the judges had it 48-47. And then he's fighting Charles Oliveira. Like, Charles Oliveira is fighting literally pound for pound guys at 24, That's crazy. He's fighting the cream of the crop at such a young age. And it's a fight of the night. He loses 29-28, Before that, he got TKO'd by Cub Swanson because he broke his orbital bone. Nothing wrong in that. Cub Swanson was 17-5. Cub Swanson was one of the best fighters on the planet at the same time as well. Like, like this is where Cub Swanson was at the time. Right after he beat Charles Oliveira, he beat Dustin Poirier. He beat Dennis Siver. He beat Jeremy Stevens. This was a 23-9 Jeremy Stevens. Not the 30-20 Jeremy Stevens we know today. And honestly, you could make the argument that Cub Swanson at this time was robbed of his title shot. Cub Swanson should have fought Conor McGregor at this time. They shouldn't have booked him against Frankie Edgar. You know, but that's another topic in itself. But look, like as I'm going back on seeing his losses, he's fighting guys in their prime. Max Holloway, he didn't really lose that one. He tore his esophagus a minute and a half into the fight. When you hear that happen, tearing your esophagus, that's crazy. Now fights Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis at the time still pretty good. Loses the guillotine choke in a very competitive fight, and then loses to Ricardo Lamas. Goes in a short notice. Loses, gets submitted. But he had a horrible weight cut. He came in on short notice. They're fighting at altitude in Mexico. Lamas is at a full camp. Lamas is one of the more underrated guys that's fought in the UFC. I feel bad for Ricardo Lamas. That guy doesn't get enough respect that he deserves. Was he a bit shinny? Yes. But when it came to grappling, Ricardo Lamas could grapple with anyone in the UFC. Anyone between 145 and 155, that guy could grapple with anyone. Most of his losses were by TKO. And he lost to some of the best of the best. His first two losses were at lightweight. He never belonged in lightweight. I mean, he tapped out Cub Swanson. He beat Hatsu Hioki, who was a wizard at the time. Eric Coach, I was there live for that, my first UFC event. He gave Jose Aldo a bit of a hard time in the last two rounds. Smoked out a prime Dennis Bermudez, who was seen as the next big thing. No shame in losing to Chad Money Mendez. No shame in losing to Max Holloway. No shame in losing to Josh Emmett. Got robbed against Bektik. No shame against losing to Calvin Kattar. Look at all these names I've mentioned. This guy's losing to the best of the best. It's not like Oliveira's losing to bums. He's fighting the cream of the crop so early in his career. But now, ever since 2018, Charles Oliveira has beat everyone that he's faced and finished everyone except Tony Ferguson. And honestly, if that first round had 5 more seconds, he's taking Tony Ferguson's arm home with him. Let's just look at Charles Oliveira's last 3 fights. Justin Gaethje, first round finish, rear naked choke. Dustin Poirier, rear naked choke, 3rd round. Michael Chandler, 2nd round, TKO finish. Tony Ferguson, unanimous decision. Kevin Lee, 3rd round, guillotine choke. Those are his past 5 fights. Top 10 opposition every single time. Now, Islam Makhachev, one of the best of the best. Not a big fan of Makhachev, but that's more personal reasons. He's actually a pretty cool guy. He's actually kind of funny. But, it's one of those things where he's had so many canceled fights, and I think it's mostly his manager talking, but usually when these guys trash talk, it just sounds super arrogant, especially when they pride themselves on respect and stuff. But, hey, man, he's Makhachev, although maybe he doesn't. If it was anyone else, they would never gotten a title shot, because he's getting a title shot over wins over Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, and Thiago Moises, and Drew Dober. Those guys are outside the top 10 now. They're like ranked from like 11 to 16. He hasn't fought anyone in the top 10. He did beat Arman Tsarukyan back in 2019, but Arman wasn't ranked at the time. Arman barely just got ranked in the top 10. His loss to Gamrot and just changes in general pushed him up to be top 10. Pushed him in that number 9 range or number 10 range, because Ferguson moved up weight class. Conor's been inactive, just shuffling back here and forth. So he just recently became top 10. But at the time he wasn't. And Tsarukyan was a young kid at the time. I believe he was 22 at the time, 23. He was still a kid. He's still young. He's still only 26. But I think Islam is not as good as Khabib. He has been put in dangerous positions. He has lost. He got knocked out against Adriano Martins back in 2015. and he was dropped by Davi Ramos. He has been cracked a few times, and you can't be doing that against someone like Charles Oliveira. And Charles has been training his wrestling. He has a very, very decorated wrestler in his corner who did live in Dagestan for a few months, who does train a lot of wrestling and everything, you know. So I think we're going to get a Charles Oliveira first round finish via TKO. I think he's going to actually submission. I think Charles is going to pressure Islam, show no fear. He's not going to be afraid to go to the ground. He's going to just get in his face, just throw picture perfect technique with his hands, and he's going to catch Islam. He's going to drop him, hurt him, and then he's going to wrap up a submission, and it's going to be good night. So I'm going to go with Charles Oliveira first round finish, and he's going to be the crowned king. He's currently the uncrowned king because he was stripped of his title because he missed weight by half a pound, but he will be the champion once again. And I do think Islam might be champion someday, but just not tomorrow, or not this week. Because Islam's very good. I think Islam does beat everyone else. Everyone that Charles has beat, I think Islam beats too. I think Islam smokes Justin. I think he smokes Poirier. I think he smokes Tony Ferguson. I think he smokes Kevin Lee. The only one that's I feel like is going to give problems to either fellow, Charles Oliveira or Islam Makhachev, is Mateusz Gamrot. We might get a new contender before that fight even happens with Mateusz Gamrot. So I just can't wait. There's going to be the best of the best. And I'm so excited. I hope you guys tune in. The fights are going to be exciting. I honestly think maybe two or three, maybe just two fights are going to be duds, and one of them is going to be the very first fight of the card. And other than that, I think it's just going to be action all around. And the crowd has been going crazy for all these Russian fellows. I mean, how many Russians do we have on this card? Or from the Caucasus region? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Geez, 11 fighters from that are going to be getting applause and cheers. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. You're going to see a little Hasbullah out there too. If you're any Hasbullah fans, you might also see Andrew Tate. He's been hanging out with some of the fighters, so look forward to that. I hope everyone tunes in. If you're still here, thank you so much for staying this long. I know this has been a long video, but I mean, there's 14 fights on this card, so it's kind of crazy. There used to be, actually there's 13 fights now. There used to be 15. We had 2 fights just drop out very recently this week, so it's a bit of a shame. I was looking forward to those, but it is what it is. We still have 13 fights, 13 great fights, 12 great fights, and one okay one. But like I said, if you guys are still here, thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Please share this with your friends. Let's make our sport well known. Let's have the casuals tune in, because this is just a great night of fights. And if there's a card you want them to watch, is this one. The highest level of fighting, where it's going to be seen Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. So I can't wait for it. I hope you guys share this with your friends and family. Thank you so much for everything. But if you want to dislike and talk some shit too, so be it. Who gives a fuck? You guys are just helping with the algorithm anyways. But thank you so much. God bless everyone. Have a wonderful week. Stay safe. I'm out.